Welcome to CyberSecurity Heroes, an IRONSCALES podcast about you, the heroes of cybersecurity. You're about to hear and learn practical and experiential knowledge in our conversations with CISOs, security directors and architects, SOC analysts, and other InfoSec stars so we can become more cyber resilient and safer together. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to CyberSecurity Heroes. I'm your host for today's episode, Brendan Rudd, Community Director at IRONSCALES, an email security platform powered by AI, enhanced by thousands of customer security teams, and built around detecting and removing threats in the inbox. We offer a service that is fast to deploy, easy to operate, and is unparalleled in the ability to stop all types of email threats, including advanced attacks like business email compromise, account takeover, and more. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get into the show.
Hey, Rael, and welcome back to the show.
Hi, Brandon. Great to be here again.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to demystify the Gartner email security guide for those of you who may not be familiar with the email security space and the jargons. If you didn't read it yet or don't have access to it, don't worry. We will be covering the main takeaways. And so without any further ado, let's get into the show. So I summarized the overview because I felt it could be made simpler to read and easier to understand. As part of their overview on the document, it says there is a continued increase in volume and success of phishing attacks. Companies are migrating more to cloud email, but they don't know how the inherent risks and vulnerabilities of being in the cloud and their current solutions, for example, the incumbent secure email gateway, is not appropriate to the new cloud architecture and changing threat landscape. So security and risk management leaders are required to do a reevaluation of email security controls and processes. So before we dive in deeper, I would love to break this down for our audience. What is the difference between secure email gateway and what is the new category we see evolving over the last 5 years or so now called ICES, Integrated Cloud Email Security?
Yes, so it's a great question, and one of the things that Gartner is mentioning in this guide, and it's trending in the past 5 or 6 years, is that we're shifting from looking at email security as something that should be done only on the gateway level into something that we are now starting to see happening more and more on the mailbox level. And what it means, gateway versus mailbox. Gateway level, or the more traditional solutions, were designed to be positioned in line in front of your mail server, whether it's on-prem or traditionally on-prem, and this is one of the biggest differences, and basically filter out everything that is known to be bad. So lots of signature and rule-based tactics that are designed to say, hey, if it's already known to be malicious, please stop it and make sure that it's not hitting my servers as an organization. With ICES, that was previously called ISS by Gartner showing that mailbox level solutions that were designed mostly around individual and behavior detection and anomaly detection are gaining momentum, since chasing threats keep you behind the curve, in a sense that new threats are being created on a daily basis. It's about 4 million new phishing emails are created every day. And if you're just trying to chase threats and create signatures in order to block threats, you will always be behind. With the ICS approach, it's more, instead of just focusing on what is known to be bad, let's go back and learn the mailbox and learn the organization in order to be able to answer a different question, which is it good? Is it known to be good? Like, does it match with what we normally see or define as a normal behavior, safe and trusted behavior? And if it's not, if it's an anomaly, let's make sure that we can flag it and then start asking some questions regarding whether we see some bad signs, like indication of compromise or any other signals that can let us know or help us better determine the type of this email.
Thanks for that, Rael. And just as a follow-up question for our audience, what is the main technological difference in the architecture between Secure Email Gateway and the ICES category?
It's a good question. If you remember at the beginning of the day, secure email gateways, or in the previous name, spam filters, were mostly designed to deal with high volume of spam or bad emails that are being sent to your mailboxes. And then it made perfect sense to make sure that we put something inline, we put something pre-delivery that is blocking the emails from making it to the inboxes to begin with. As technology evolved, and Gartner is mentioning it on their guide as well, like the built-in securities that Microsoft and Google can now provide out of the box, in the sense of what they can do against spam and even low-level phishing, companies now need to focus more on the more sophisticated and precise attacks. So it's no longer a volumetric kind of problem, and therefore it doesn't require an inline solution. You already have one inline solution. The EOP or Google will act as your SEG or as your inline solution in a way that will filter out the majority of the volumetric attack. Now companies need to focus on the 1% that is creating 90% of the damage, without the more targeted, precise social engineering, like all the financial fraud and BEC that we are seeing out there. So that's the main thing that separates the ICS from the SEGs of the world.
Awesome. And coming back to the overview, so we want to break down what Gartner wrote in their opening paragraph for the document. And I guess the first question would be, why has the volume and success increased for phishing attacks?
Simply because it was proven to be successful, and we know that phishing is providing a very good ROI to threat actors these days. They've learned that there is a good, better way to monetize on phishing attacks, which is social engineering and BEC. They know how to work around traditional defenses. They know that most companies out there are still relying on traditional defenses in order to try and stop the old phishing, the one that is more focused on malware, IOC, and stuff like that. And therefore, we see the volumes going up, and the attacks are more successful. If you add to that the fact that attackers are now using more automation, more and more AI in order to deliver phishing, you'll find the main reason behind it is that first successful bet, they've learned how to automate.
And would you say that it's also much more widely accessible now via the dark web? You mentioned phishing kits.
The dark web and the fact that monetizing on phishing is no longer something that threat actors can do only against enterprise and large companies. They can target the mid and even the small market and still be able to make money out of it. So the attack surface grew up in a significant way. Everyone is using email. Many companies are changing their infrastructure to the cloud now, and you'll find yourself that the attack surface is much, much bigger. They are much more sophisticated, automated, in the sense that they are executing with phishing campaigns. Yes, it's a very low level. You don't need to be an expert. Like back in the days, you had to be this crazy hacker in order to scan ports and find vulnerabilities and run exploits. Now you buy a kit, you choose a template, you send it, and you collect Bitcoins. Crypto is obviously yet another trend that really helps threat actors to collect the money. Back in the days, muling and being able to extract the funds was a hell of a big of a problem. Now it's pretty easy. Crypto pretty much made it easy for the bad guys, the cyber criminals, to be able to monetize quickly.
And they also mentioned the migration of companies to the cloud. What's pushing or continuing this migration to the cloud?
Obviously, COVID really contributed to the fact that companies are now moving to the cloud. People are working remotely. There are hybrid environments. It just makes perfect sense to move stuff to the cloud. Protecting assets in the clouds and application and services in the cloud is becoming much more easier this day than trying to insist and create a perimeter to protect on. It's very hard to say when this migration will be over, if ever. Some more traditional industries will obviously stay longer as an on-prem based organizations, but the migration to the cloud is real, and it was even expedited during COVID.
And what does cloud migration and the new threat landscape have to do with reevaluating security controls and processes?
I think that first, moving to the cloud is opening new opportunities and new stuff that you can do that was not available in an on-prem environment. But second, I think that it's more kind of related to the fact that the threat landscape is changing, and not just where we're doing our hosting and processing. necessarily. It's just the fact that threat actors are trying to be more sophisticated in the way that they're introducing risks and threats to organizations these days, whether they're cloud or non-cloud.
So let's dig into some of the key findings from the report. So the first one I want to get your insights on is the adoption of cloud email systems continues to grow, forcing security and risk management leaders to evaluate the native capabilities offered by these providers. So what should companies evaluate when looking at cloud native email security providers?
So first and foremost, and it's not just for email, it's for many other things that you can get out of the box when moving to the cloud. Some of the cloud applications, cloud provider, there are some built-in security capabilities that comes with the offering. More specifically to email, we already discussed, the Exchange Online Protection that is, basically a free seg that is included with every tenant and is protecting every mailbox out there when you move to the cloud. Gartner is mentioning that Microsoft and Google are becoming better and better to the point that trying to basically rationalize why a seg, why a second inline solution makes sense. Trying to quantify the ROI around it is becoming very challenging because you don't need two inline solutions that are doing the same thing. I'm a big believer in defense in depth, but redundancy is not something that should happen at this point. Like, you don't need two solutions that are doing basically the same stuff. So yes, as you're moving to the cloud, spam filter is not something that you need anymore, specifically with email security. Basic malware and ransom protection and signature-based solution and rule-based solution, and the table stakes of the email security are already provided for free. And companies need to only to worry about the most sophisticated attacks. They don't need to worry about the basics.
Another key finding they mentioned is solutions that integrate directly into cloud email via an API rather than as a gateway ease evaluation, deployment, and improvement detection accuracy, while still taking advantage of the integration of the bulk phishing protection with the core platform. Can you expand on those two statements just to clarify for anyone who's not so familiar with this terminology?
Sure. What Gartner are saying basically is that while the efficacy of the products that are protecting our emails is very important, the ease of deployment, the ease of management, and the potential disruption to email flows and the like is yet another thing that need to be taken into consideration. So yes, you need something that can stop phishing, but you need something that can be easily deployed, easily tested and evaluated, obviously, hopefully in a monitoring on this silent mode, just to show value without forcing any change management inside the organization, and obviously easy to manage.
And then they go on to say vendor consolidation and integration with other security tools enable improved detection and response capabilities, aka extended detection and response EDR. How is this integration of these cloud native email security platforms extending detection and response?
The concept of XDR, or extended detection and response, is basically saying that we can look at things like endpoint detection and response, email detection and response, and even cloud and network detection and response solutions, and bring them together in an integrated way that really makes sense and allows some more correlation or better, faster, and even automated correlations, to the sense that these solutions are not siloed anymore. Something that happens in the endpoint might have started in the email. Something that has started in the email as a click on a link might ended up as a network kind of problem by someone downloading malware or doing something of the like. So by bringing all these kind of things into a cloud-based environment and integrating them in a way that makes your security posture more holistic in nature will really help to extend detection and response and expedite the response and the time to detect and time to response.
For those who may be familiar with some of these acronyms, this also overlaps with SOAR, right? Security Operations Automation and Response.
So there are a few ways to achieve XDR. Some of them can be achieved by basically customizing XDR by bringing the best solutions together and using the SOA in order to orchestrate everything. Some companies are doing it as a single kind of vendor, homegrown, home-baked kind of solution that is doing all these things without using a SOA solution. XDR is it's still pretty new thing, and different companies taking different approaches. We see MDR and MSSP solutions taking one approach, and some other vendors like Palo Alto and others taking a different approach to it. So there is definitely some kind of consolidation. There is definitely this understanding that XDR is where companies need to go at the end of the day in order to get a better detection and response capabilities.
If I'm reading between the lines, it's also better for the customer because they can now connect all their existing tech stack. They don't have to have blind spots. Things can now talk to each other. They can better utilize what they already have. Is that right?
Yeah, connecting the different solutions is one thing, and building something on top that actually makes sense and know how to make the correlation is a second thing. So yes, we're becoming better in the first. We still have a lot of work to do with the second.
So it's actually making it work is the hard part. Connecting them is the easy part.
Especially in the cloud, kind of, in today's cloud environment. And this is why Gartner is basically recommending people to at least aspire to move to the cloud and have these things at least connected to the point that we...
Awesome. So moving on to another key finding is they call it ransomware impersonation and account takeover attacks are increasing and causing direct financial loss as users place too much trust in the identities associated with email, inherently vulnerable to deception and social engineering. They go on to say the evolution in threats has led to increased demand for other techniques and services, such as domain-based message authentication, reporting and conformance, which is DMARC, cloud access security broker, CASB, API integrations, continuous awareness and mail-focused security orchestration, automation and response, MSOR. So again, can you elaborate a bit on how each of these techniques and capabilities are helping reduce risk and improve efficiency, and just kind of simplify this for people wanting to understand it better?
Gartner is basically talking about advanced detection, like, this all impersonation, or trying to answer this very simple but complex question of who is sending what. Like they say, they tend to trust on the who, and our job is to help them get a better understanding of who is behind the message, who is sending this message. DMARC and the like the DKIM and SPF, can really help organizations to protect their customers against impersonation, just to make sure that no one is sending emails on their behalf, but it's only covering a very small part of what we are seeing that threat actors are presenting out there, and it's a practice that is very hard to follow and maintain. It takes lots of time and resources, and it's an ever-growing kind of project that companies need to devote to and dedicate people and resources to, which is never easy. The second thing around BC and these kind of things is obviously to be able to be in the mailbox, understand communication, understand anomalies, and understand that the most devastating attacks out there are not the emails that comes with a bad link or with bad attachment, but with a bad intent, trying to lure people to, or social engineer them into doing something that they're not supposed to do, to hack the business process, make them change records, change bank account details, wire money, buy cards, and pay fake invoices, and all the good stuff that doesn't necessarily have any specific signature or indication of compromise attached to this specific message. When they talk about MSOR, again, MSOR is just a better way to make sure that we can act quickly on those bad signals that we can collect on the mailbox level, and make sure that we can quickly remediate emails from people's mailboxes before they can interact with them. So I think these are the main kind of abbreviations that we're using, and my attempt to kind of shed some more lights of what it means and why they mention it as a way to fight modern phishing.
And again, if I will read between the lines of what they're saying, it feels like email is starting to develop or borrow from the concept of defense in depth. It's no longer just like awareness and training or a secure email gateway or
just demark. You got to layer up in order to have a more robust protection.
Yes, and you should never forget the most important layer, which is the human layer. Like, Gartner is talking about, awareness and education and changing behavior as yet another important layer to achieve better results against phishing.
Cool. So let's run quickly through their recommendations. They say use email security solutions that include anti-phishing technology for business email compromise protection that uses AI to detect communication patterns and conversation style anomalies, as well as computer vision for inspecting suspect URLs. Then they continue to say consider products that also include context aware banners to help reinforce security awareness training. So, what do they mean here by technology for BEC, AI to detect communication patterns and anomalies?
So BC are the type of attacks that are non-signature in nature, which means you cannot create a signature to protect against BC. There is no link, no attachments. And in order to detect BC, what you really need to be able to do is to use behavioral models in order to learn the user, learn the mailboxes, and try and assume who's going to try and impersonate those users in a sense that, when you look at BC, it will mostly come from someone or something that you already know. The threat actors will, if they're running the reconnaissance, they will come up with colleagues or services or products that we are using and will try to lure users in order to do stuff that they're not supposed to do. Now, in order to know who they know and what kind of services they're using, you really need to learn and look for anomalies, which means if normally I'm getting a DocuSign messages, for example, in a certain way, if someone will try and impersonate DocuSign as a service, only AI anomaly-based kind of solution can detect it. Now, why banners are so important? Banners are important because it's not black and white. There's lots of gray area when it comes to PEC and targeted phishing. Companies need to be able to make sure that they are be able to put something in front of the users even when it's not deterministic, which means when they think that this specific email might be a dangerous email or might put the user or the organization in danger. And these panels needs to be very contextual in the sense that basically what the organization is saying to the user: listen, this email was not suspicious enough for us to go right away and block it. On the other hand, we don't want to leave it in your mailbox unattended. So we are adding this kind of contextual banner, which is a teachable moment, but more than being an awareness banner, it's actually a banner that gives the user some more insights regarding what we see that is suspicious inside the email. For example, hey, we know for sure that you know this person because we learned your inbox, but this time it's coming from an unknown source, or we think that someone is impersonating, or there is a typo with the name, or the domain that they're using, and many other kinds of use cases that only an anomaly-based detection solution, AI power that is contextual in nature, can help to flag out. On the computer vision part, we know that credential theft is one of the biggest threats. Threat actors are using fake landing pages in order to steal credentials. Obviously, they're using polymorphic attacks, and they're obfuscating the code in order to bypass HTML-based scanners, which means, again, no signature will be able to detect these emails. But there is one thing that they can't really change in a way that will not raise suspiciousness, and it's the way that they look like, which means in order for me to believe that this is an Office 365 login page or a Google login page or a DocuSign or Okta or whatever, it must look like the page. It must be something that I find familiar, otherwise I will not provide my credentials. And in order to deal with things that are obfuscated by nature, which means the code constantly changing and there is no signature that can stop it, we must take a visual kind of approach in a sense that we are comparing images and not necessarily comparing the code of the HTML page that is behind what we see on the screen. And this is why it's very important to use computer vision and deep learning techniques in order to stop these kinds of attacks as well. I know it was a long answer, but I really wanted to make sure that I'm covering all the different points.
No, you're good. The follow-up question, why can secure email gateways not provide the communication patterns and the conversation anomalies? Like, why can't they solve this problem?
Secure email gateways, they have many blind spots. Since they are, located at the gateway and outside of the perimeter, they don't see all the data and the behavioral things that mailbox level solutions can see. For example, is this user normally deleting this email, or is he forwarding it internally? What kinds of action, how long he lingers on this specific email, and many other kind of parameters that mailbox level and behavioral kind of based solution, user behavior based solution, can collect and take into account when trying to really understand communication habits, what makes sense and what might be an anomaly that we should either block or flag with banners.
Awesome. They go on to say, invest in user education and implement standard operating procedures for handling financial and sensitive data transactions commonly targeted by impersonation attacks. Remove as many targeted ad hoc processes from email as possible. What do they mean by removing as many targeted ad hoc processes from email?
So Bayesian and social engineering essentially are used in order, like I believe we said before, to hack the business process, which means if the threat actors know that an email coming from the CEO can trigger a wire transfer, or someone going and buying something for the CEO, the CFO, paying an invoice just based on an email, they will take advantage of it. It's very important first to put the right controls in place in order to make sure that these kinds of things are not happening via email. And second, to make sure that people are aware. So it's a combination of awareness, make sure that people know that it can happen and they should not follow that, but put the right controls in place in order to make sure that it can happen. For example, two signatures, or create a process where you really need to call back to the company that sent the invoice in order to verify that the invoice was actually sent. Or if the CEO is asking something over email, it will never be considered legit unless there is a predefined way to validate the nature of this ask or transaction.
Okay. And then they go on to say, take advantage of emerging APIs to integrate email events into a broader XDR or security information and event management. So SIM, security orchestration, analytics, and reporting strategy. So SOAR. I know we touched on this earlier, but perhaps you can just expand on this a little bit more.
Sure. So this one is not easy, and in most cases requires a pretty mature security organization, or to basically outsource it to managed service providers or companies that already built this infrastructure. But it's always a good practice to make sure that you can correlate different events from different controls, which means you want to see how things that started at the email propagated to the endpoint or the network, and vice versa. If you're seeing something suspicious on your endpoint, you want to go back and try and correlate it back to specific emails or events or things that are more specific to access and controls from your users. So again, by integrating via API and making sure all this data flows into a central position that can do some post-processing in order to correlate and find anomalies across the different function is a good practice.
Yeah, because I think you also mentioned it earlier, like traditionally email security has had many blind spots, and now email security is actually becoming one of the focal sources of orchestration. You can correlate your events across your entire email and across your entire technology stack, which I think adds a lot of value and helps to reduce risk, and having disparate teams working in different tools and maybe doing the same work twice. I'm sure there's a lot of value by being able to have this closed feedback loop or ecosystem.
Especially with email security solutions that have an MSO component, the messaging security automation orchestration, which allows you to trigger clawback, not necessarily based on bad content or things that have been rescanned by antiviruses and were clawed back based on the fact that future scans discovered some indication of compromise inside those attachments or link, but mainly based on like like we said earlier, we are seeing some anomaly in one part of the organization. We can relate it back to a specific type or group of emails, and we want to go and be able to respond on it immediately in order to make sure that the attack is contained. One use case can be, for example, ransomware infection. Like, once we recognize that a specific file is malicious, we can try and go back and fix it at the mailbag for it to stop propagating inside the organization on the endpoint.
And the last recommendation they made here was ensure that email is included in your data protection strategy by examining the types of data shared externally via email and putting appropriate controls in place. So I assume they are referring to DLP here.
DLP and accidental data loss are definitely things that companies should look into. Most of these things are supported by default, whatever you're using, Google or Microsoft. Just make sure that you are applying the right policies in order to make sure that confidential data and proprietary data is not leaking outside of the organization.
And would this somewhat overlap with insider threat, like someone taking data from the company, forwarding it to their own email?
It might, but I think that in most cases they're talking about unintentional insider where they're just making an honest mistake. And if you're sending something sensitive, make sure that if the recipient is allowed, is whitelisted, that at least the data is being encrypted in transit. So again, this kind of capabilities are built in or can be bought from third parties, but it's definitely something that is important to take into consideration.
Awesome. And to wrap up today's episode, is there anything else you would like to add that you think we missed before we wrap up here today?
No, and to be honest, I think that Gartner is on point. If we are comparing it to last year's kinds of marketing guide, which kind of, for the first time ever introduced what they back then called IESS, and now is being called ICES, as solutions that are more focused and dedicated to deal with modern phishing threats, mailbox level, more behavioral, less malware, less signatures, and more things that can deal with the PC, the wire frauds, the fake invoices of the world, and the kind of things that really keeps people and mostly CISOs up at night. And it was great to see that this trend continues and that Gartner and others are starting to realize the importance of dealing with these specific threats and not sit and wait for some bad things to happen because they have this kind of feeling that they are behind a secure email gateway or they have some training and stuff like that, which at the end of the day and evidently creating a false sense of security.
Great. And we may have covered this earlier. What was the main motivation to add that cloud component to the acronym Integrated Cloud Email Security from Integrated Email Security Solutions? What do you think was the motivation? Why is it important?
I can assume that the shift is for the cloud. Obviously, we see more and more companies moving to the cloud. And it's very important that people will understand that in order to protect something in the cloud, you need a different approach, a more cloud native and API-based approach, comparing to the more kind of gateway perimeter approach that resonates more with on-prem when you really have a premise that you need to protect. So good addition by Gartner, if you ask me. Like it's much more.
So it seems like they're wanting to make clear that cloud is the component here with the category, like it's cloud email security built for the cloud from the ground up versus trying to convert an old on-prem or technical control technology to the cloud.
Yeah, it's a clear distinguish between cloud to more traditional kinds of solutions that are trying to patch and modify themselves to adopt themselves to the cloud, but are not cloud native or cloud in nature.
And then final question, looking forward, where do you see the next iteration of this category going?
I see this all cloud integration trend continue in the sense that like I said, the user is the endpoint and integrated cloud solutions will try to keep up with the threat and make sure that we are circling or surrounding the users with all the protections that he needs from communication and non-communication perspective in the sense of meeting users where they are communicating, where they're operating, and make sure that we can provide with a full comprehensive solution that is integrated by nature, which means it's easy to deploy. It's connecting to the cloud. It's not deploying or being installed anywhere, and can be everywhere, like regardless whether the user is working from home, his workstation, from vacation. Everything is very fluid these days. So we see more and more kind of solution trying to meet the users where they're at the cloud and API based to provide this kind of protection.
So covering basically all communication channels, not just email. We look forward to seeing that come to fruition. Thank you so much, Eyal, for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. It was great to be here again.
Yeah, we hope you guys and girls got some value out of today's session. And till next time, thank you for joining us on CyberSecurity Heroes.
That's a wrap for this episode of CyberSecurity Heroes. Practical and experiential knowledge on a day in the life of security heroes. Catch our next episode by subscribing through your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating for the show. They really help a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.